B. Collins.
Peter B. Collins, news and comment. Hope you had a great Labor Day holiday break. We're back in action here with news and comment for Tuesday, September 4th, 2018. And this is the date of the commencement of a new episode of Supreme Court Confirmation Theater. We need a British accented announcer, I think, to bring that off properly. But in a predictable fashion, the Democrats opened very aggressively in today's U.S. Senate confirmation hearings for Trump nominee to the Supreme Court, Brett Kavanaugh, a man about 50 years of age who can be expected to serve 30, if not 40 years on the court. And the Democrats, from the opening statement of Chairman Charles Grassley, were right up there. And the first interrupter was our junior senator from California, Kamala Harris, who is a feisty former prosecutor, and she has shown in previous Senate hearings that she has no fear. And she considers herself a possible contender for president in 2020, and this is kind of a rehearsal for her, at least in part. But our senior senator chimed right in, and in her opening statements, Dianne Feinstein attacked Kavanaugh over his positions on a woman's right to choose an abortion, gun control, and also on presidential power. And all of this is a carefully constructed drama that will play out to a predictable end. And I hope I'm not the spoiler for you here, but it's very clear that conservative Democrats will break away from the other members of their caucus and provide a comfortable margin of at least 3 to 5 votes for the confirmation of Mr. Kavanaugh. And we'll get to the replacement senator from Arizona who's being rushed into the game. But let's note that these feisty Democrats just a week ago quietly agreed to 7 Republican district and appeals court nominees without any kerfuffle. No, they just said, you guys have us by the ears and we're not going to fight on these. We'll stage a big drama around the Supreme Court confirmation process. And so the Democrats have substantive issues on which to oppose Brett Kavanaugh. He's a proven liar. He lied during his 2005-2006 confirmation hearings to the court where he currently sits. That was established when Senator Dick Durbin wrote a letter of referral to the Republican Justice Department demanding a criminal investigation, and that was tossed out by a guy who was recently reappointed to a second-level post at the U.S. Justice Department. That's not the only way the fix is in. You know that John McCain passed away, and I didn't spend any time watching the funeral proceedings over the weekend. They had to complete that without me. But the Republican governor of Arizona, Doug Ducey, has chosen former Arizona Senator Jon Kyl to at least temporarily fill McCain's empty seat. Now, for some people, this is a nice little interim appointment. It's not controversial because Jon Kyl, who used to draw the phrase Sieg Heil for Kyle, I remember that when my syndicated radio show was on in Phoenix every day. But Jon Kyl, in addition to being a retired senator, is also a member of the team shepherding the appointment of Brett Kavanaugh through the U.S. Supreme Court. Now, his conflict of interest will not be aired out because he's appointed by the governor and he takes his seat right away. No confirmation of an interim senator. But it's just the most visible and latest poke in the eye to transparency, to process, to an honest vetting and evaluation of a candidate who gets a lifetime appointment, one of the most critical jobs in the U.S. governmental system. And the interruptions that Kamala Harris began and were picked up by her other Democratic colleagues in the Judiciary Committee today were protests over the way the Republicans have tried to prevent certain documents from being reviewed by the Democrats in a timely and full manner before the hearing begins. As of Friday, the count was about 100,000 pages of White House documents that are linked to Kavanaugh from the time he served in the George W. Bush administration. And he had a pretty important job there where most of the critical documents passed over his desk. And yet back in 2005, 2006, he ducked questions about whether he had participated in discussions about torture, about the phony intelligence that led to the invasion of Iraq in 2003, and other critical issues, including surveillance. And Kavanaugh ducked all that by saying, well, that wasn't my job. But documents that surfaced after he was confirmed to his current job show that, in fact, he dissembled, if not outright lying. And sometimes it's the optics and the little things that can really set back a nominee like Kavanaugh. And he pulled one of those today as the hearing broke for lunch. A guy named Fred Gutenberg from Parkland, Florida, the father of a 14-year-old girl who was killed at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School. He was there at the hearing. And he was, well-dressed, well-shaved, a presentable guy. And he walked up to Kavanaugh, extending his hand to shake it. And Kavanaugh stiffed him. He paid attention long enough to find out who Fred Gutenberg was and what he wanted to talk about, and then he refused to extend his hand, and he turned around and walked away. That's the kind of thing that actually could end up having more impact than all of the arguments, all of the documents, the track record of Kavanaugh, particularly in the decision last year about the Jane Doe immigrant girl seeking an abortion. These are all very important issues, but the way our system works, it's the trivialities that often can derail a nomination. Now, I think this one is going to stay on the tracks. The White House feigned a claim of executive privilege of some of these documents, numbering an alleged 100,000, and then they said about 45,000 pages were going to be released, and they issued that news late last night. So the Democrats are understandably frustrated and furious, looking for a way to delay this process, if only to get past the midterm elections, because the ultimate vote will reveal the divide in the Democratic Party. When Joe Manchin, Joe Donnelly, Heidi Heitkamp, other weak-kneed Democrats like Doug Jones of Alabama, Bill Nelson of Florida, they're going to crater. They're going to find some way to justify and rationalize a bad vote confirming Brett Kavanaugh. But get this. New polling shows that only 38% of Americans believe he should be confirmed. 39% say he should not be confirmed. And 6 out of 10 Americans, which includes people in both camps, say Kavanaugh should publicly clarify his position on abortion before being confirmed. And while we're digging into the polls, 49%, according to a Washington Post ABC News poll released on Friday, support impeachment for this president, versus 46% opposed. 63% support the Mueller investigation. 53% believe Trump has tried to interfere with Mueller's investigation in a way that would make the president guilty of obstruction of justice. And here's the real perverse part. Because Trump continually attacks Jeff Sessions, 62% support Jeff Sessions and believe that he should be kept in office. I mean, he is so partisan and ill-equipped for the post that this is a really sick and twisted joke. And little Jefferson Beauregard Jim Crow Sessions III, he was the subject of more heavy tweets from his boss just yesterday. And it reveals the thuggish mobster mentality that Trump is captivated by, because he dinged Jeff Sessions for the indictments of Congressman Chris Collins, Republican of New York, on insider trading, and Congressman Duncan Hunter of Southern California. They're both Republicans, and Hunter is accused of diverting almost $250,000 of campaign funds to personal expenditures. And Trump doesn't care about any of that. Crimes, people who are deeply corrupt, those are his people. And he said Obama-era investigations of two very popular Republican congressmen were brought to a well-publicized charge just ahead of the midterms by Jeff Sessions' Justice Department. Two easy wins now in doubt because there is not enough time. Good job, Jeff. Wow. This guy really doesn't care. He is so narcissistic, self-absorbed, that he feels free to share that stream of consciousness with you, no matter how incriminating it truly is. Today's New York Times lead editorial gets it right. The Supreme Court confirmation charade. And that's actually a quote from Justice Elena Kagan, appointed by Obama, who described her confirmation process as a vapid and hollow charade. Days of tedious, predigested speeches by senators followed by carefully scripted questions, either softballs the nominee can hit out of the park or change-ups that he won't bother to swing at. And we know that Kavanaugh will not voluntarily define his positions on any critical issues. That hasn't happened in a long time with Supreme Court nominees, and they like to blame RBG for that, Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And I saw part of the RBG film on CNN last night. Very interesting stuff. The Times editorial also notes, don't forget that Judge Kavanaugh was nominated by a president whose campaign and administration are under federal criminal investigation. If confirmed, he will be in a position to rule on any case involving Trump or his associates, a disturbing scenario even before you consider his alarmingly permissive views on presidential power and authority. Speaking of judges and Trump, over the weekend, Trump was dealt a surprise by Judge Andrew Hanen in Houston. Now, he was, I believe, handpicked because of his known views about immigration. And back in 2015, he blocked an effort by the Obama administration that would have added protections under DACA for the unauthorized parents of citizens and other lawful residents. And his ruling led many to predict that when confronted with the essential issues of DACA, which was created by a presidential executive order, that he might take the same position. But describing this egg as scrambled and that he's unable to unscramble it, Hanen said that the dreamers who were brought into the United States may continue to stay here and the program cannot be canceled. So that's quite a surprise for Trump, and I'll bet he'll be tweeting at Judge Hanen faster than Who Shot Bob. Meanwhile, prepare yourself for an avalanche of dirt from the Trump White House, because Bob Woodward has a new book that is being prodigiously leaked by his own newspaper. The book is called Fear, and it's based on his exclusive interviews with many people who will be unnamed. And the Post took the unusual step of releasing articles about it, along with a recorded 12-minute phone call between Trump and Bob Woodward that took place a couple of weeks ago. And in it, Trump is upset that he didn't get to talk to Woodward before Woodward wrote his book and sent it to the publisher. And Woodward says, look, I asked Kellyanne, I asked Raj, the communications director, I asked a bunch of Republican senators, and nobody ever got back to me. And Trump is acting like this is just some error and that people in the White House, shouldn't be protecting him from Bob Woodward. But it is interesting because throughout that call, Woodward maintains that this is a book that is solidly reported and it's factual. It's going to be tough, he said. And we learn a few things from it. That, for example, this past January 19th, Trump disregarded the significance of the massive U.S. military presence on the Korean Peninsula including a special intel operation that allows the U.S. to detect a North Korean missile launch in 7 seconds. Trump questioned why the government was spending resources in the region at all. And Mad Dog Mattis, his defense boss, said, "We're doing this in order to prevent World War III." And after Trump left the meeting, the other people there told Woodward Mattis was particularly exasperated and alarmed, telling close associates the president acted like and had the understanding of a 5th or 6th grader. And John Kelly, the White House chief of staff, also a former general, has lost his temper repeatedly, told colleagues he thought the president was unhinged. Quote, "He's an idiot. It's pointless to try to convince him of anything. He's gone off the rails. We're in crazy town. I don't even know why any of us are here. This is the worst job I've ever had." He still holds that job, and he hasn't carried out any of his threats to quit. Then there's Trump telling Secretary Wilbur Ross of the Commerce Department, 80 years old, "I don't trust you. I don't want you doing any more negotiations. You're past your prime." And there's little Jeff Sessions. Trump told Rob Porter, his former White House secretary, Sessions is a traitor for recusing himself, and mocking Sessions' southern accent. Trump said, "This guy is mentally retarded. He's a dumb southerner. He wouldn't even be a one-person country lawyer in Alabama." After Bashar al-Assad was accused of launching a chemical attack, this would be Khan Shaykhun, April of 2017, Trump called Mattis and said he wanted to assassinate Bashar al-Assad. "Let's fucking kill him. Let's go in. Let's kill the fucking lot of them." Mattis told the president he'd get right on it. But after hanging up the phone, he told a nearby aide, "We're not going to do any of that. We're going to be much more measured." And then there's Gary Cohn. According to Woodward, Cohn stole one or more documents off of Trump's desk to keep him from doing stupid things. One related to a trade agreement with South Korea. Cohn told an associate he removed the letter to protect national security, and Trump didn't notice it was missing. And he claims he did a similar thing with a document related to the renegotiation of NAFTA. Then there's a tirade between Ivanka Trump and Steve Bannon. Bannon screamed at Ivanka, "You're a goddamn staffer. You walk around this place and act like you're in charge, and you're not. You're on staff." And Ivanka said, "I'm not a staffer. I'll never be a staffer. I'm the first daughter." And then there's a meeting between John Dowd, former attorney for Trump, in Bob Mueller's office with the special counsel and his deputy James Quarles. And Dowd explained to Mueller and Quarles why he was trying to keep the president from testifying to Mueller. "I'm not going to sit there and let him look like an idiot, and you publish that transcript because everything leaks in Washington, and the guys overseas are going to say, 'I told you he was an idiot. I told you he was a goddamn dumbbell. What are we dealing with this idiot for?' Mueller, according to Woodward, replied, 'John, I understand.' And the next month, Dowd quit after saying that he couldn't help Trump. And one more juicy quote here. After his press conference, after the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, Virginia, Trump admitted it was the biggest fucking mistake and the worst speech he's ever given. But we're not sure if it's because he didn't go all in with the white right. And speaking of Charlottesville, over the weekend I got to see Black Klansman, the new film by Spike Lee. And it's uneven in parts, but it is quite an expose of white American racism, and I encourage you to go see it when you have a chance. Every day I pause to thank the people who support my work at the Peter B. Collins Podcast with your subscriptions. And I want to give a special shout-out to Craig Daniels in North Bend, Oregon, because I was cleaning my car yesterday, and I found a note and a check that you sent me back in April. It was intended to honor my birthday, and I did receive it, Craig, and I'm just getting around to acknowledging it. Sorry about that. I also want to thank Mona Kobus, Jerry White, Jerry in Portland, Kevin Beckley, and the incredible Faith Peoples. Faith is a longtime supporter of this podcast, and in a moment I'm going to share with you an important report that she linked me to and, in fact, followed up twice to make sure that I got a look at this. But before I go there, I just want to invite you to become a subscriber. All you have to do is visit peterbcollins.com, click on the menu tab, pull it down, click on Become a Subscriber. When you land on the sign-up page, it's easy to choose an option from PayPal, $5, $10, $20 a month, the $50 annual subscription. And if you prefer to correspond directly and avoid PayPal, my address is Box 150, 660, San Rafael, California, 94915. That's Box 150, 660, San Rafael, zip 94915. So, Faith Peoples, while I was on vacation, she sent me an email with a link to this massive document. And I took a glance at it, and then in the rush of things, I pretty much forgot about it. And over the weekend, she sent me the link again and said, maybe you missed this. And Faith, I'm glad you did, because I had time on Labor Day to read through over 200 pages of the work of a man named Yaakov Appelbaum. And I don't know that much about Yaakov, but I did a Google search, and he is a pretty well-respected tech executive, a guy who knows a lot about digital technology and various related matters. And in this 200-page piece called The Illustrated Primer, The Mechanics of Deception, which was originally posted on March 17th of this year, he exposes what he calls the dossier network. Now, let me be fair. I'm linking to this document, and I strongly encourage you to take a look at it. I know it's a lot to read a couple of hundred pages. But what this exposes is the network of roughly 25 people who he calls the dossier network. Many of them are married to one another. They come out of journalism. They come out of spy groups in the U.S. and in Britain. And together, they form Fusion GPS and the network of people who have promoted the Trump-Russia narrative. And it is stunning to see, for example, that Natalia Veselnitskaya, the demonized woman who took the meeting at Trump Tower, remember, and she was going to dish dirt on Hillary's emails, but ended up talking about the Magnitsky Act and about orphans. Well, Veselnitskaya was working with Fusion GPS to help lobby Congress against the Magnitsky Act. And so Fusion GPS and its people had multiple interests operating at the same time. And when you link in Stephen Halper, this guy that the Republicans, Devin Nunes and others, went to great lengths to conceal his identity and his role. He is the guy who goes back to dirty tricks with Ronald Reagan. He is a close friend of the former head of MI6, Sir Richard Dearlove. And together, they worked at a company with a difficult name called Hantuk or something like that. And Hantuk was directly connected to Orbis Business Intelligence, which was the company co-founded by Christopher Steele. Then you get Nellie Orr and Bruce Orr. Bruce is the Associate Deputy Attorney General. He's on the hot seat right now, testifying to Congress just in recent weeks. But Nellie Orr worked for Fusion GPS as a Russian intelligence analyst. And we see this play out with some of the other people. Mary Jacoby is Glenn Simpson's wife and co-founder of Fusion GPS. And some of these people have multiple online identities, specifically Mary Jacoby and the wife of Stephen Halper. It's not clear what they do with them. But the connections that are dramatically depicted, a lot of graphs, a lot of pictures that demonstrate who these people are, and the connection between Stephen Halper and this company called Hackloot, Hakluyt. It also brings in a more direct connection with Professor Joseph Mifsud, the guy who apparently trapped George Papadopoulos, or at least got involved with him in ways that we can't explain. And so this is a remarkable compendium of what I would call the counter-narrative to Rachel Maddow, the DNC, and the narrative offered by the New York Times and the Washington Post. And at the risk of getting too tedious here, I want to take one more quote from the illustrated primer, The Mechanics of Deception. One thing worth noting is that just like in the case of the Core Dossier Network, many receptive reporters, including David Corn, Joe Palazzolo, David K. Johnston, I'm surprised to see his name here, Scott Dworkin, and Evan Perez, had long incestuous relationships with Fusion GPS and its team members. So, as I say, there is much more in this 200-page document. But I encourage you to get it on your computer or your tablet, your iPad, and scroll through it, because it makes a very strong case. And if this ever blows open in a public way, the American media will be in deep, deep doo-doo, and it will give an opening to a demagogue like Trump to declare that it really was fake news, that it really was a witch hunt, and that he was framed. So I continue to raise serious questions about the whole Trump-Russia narrative. You're quite well aware of that. I know that it's wearing on some people, but I am determined to follow the facts, follow the evidence as it surfaces, and I will keep reporting it to you. Colin Kaepernick is back in the news. He was at the U.S. Open Friday to see Serena and Venus Williams play. And the New York Times notes in a piece today that he has developed a very clever strategy where he uses Twitter primarily to retweet the comments of others. But with the exception of a speech he gave when he accepted an award from a human rights group, Colin Kaepernick has kept a very studious radio silence. Last April, he accepted Amnesty International's Ambassador of Conscience Award, and he spoke for 7 minutes. But what has really lit the flames, of course, is Trump's constant, repetitive commentary about taking a knee during the national anthem, the way he panders to his right-wing nuts about that. And Nike, the sports apparel concern owned by Phil Knight, which has its own issues. It's hardly a virtuous organization. But they've taken a critical stand, and they're featuring Colin Kaepernick in their 30th anniversary ad campaign around the phrase, "Just do it." And that takes a lot of balls. I give them credit for confronting, in this manner, the ugly jingoistic commentary that comes from Trump. And it's reflected by people like Carla Maloney. She just resigned as secretary of the Republican Committee of Beaver County, Pennsylvania, after a comment online on Facebook. She said, "Tired of these overpaid, ignorant blacks telling me what I should believe in. I will tell you what I believe in, and that is our flag, the national anthem, and America, period, end of story. You don't like it? Go to Africa and see how you like it there." So we'll see how this plays out. But it is interesting that corporate power has often been the antidote to some of the heavy-handed demagoguery of recent years. And I'm thinking of the bathroom restrictions in North Carolina. Well, we've heard so much about Russiagate and how the Russians are planning to manipulate this fall's midterm election. Nobody says how they'll do that, but, the fear is rampant. I mentioned on Friday that my lefty friend Norman Goldman has been hinting that Andrew Gillum, the black Democrat who surprised everyone and won the nomination for governor of Florida, may have been elected by Putin. Well, despite all the fear-mongering, there is a bipartisan bill called the Secure Elections Act, and it has now all but collapsed in the Congress. Last week, it was supposed to get ready to go to the floor. That was abruptly postponed, and Roy Blunt of Missouri said that it needs additional majority support. That means Republicans are not willing to authorize a law that would require backup paper ballots. Yes, hand-counted paper ballots. Can you imagine that in the United States of America? But secretaries of state say, well, it's too onerous and costly to audit some of the results. They should be doing that anyway. And we know that they are just avoiding accountability by taking this duck. And finally today, I want to recommend a powerful op-ed, a brilliant piece of rational argument, published in the New York Times today under the byline of Professor Joseph Levine. He is a philosophy professor at UMass Amherst. And his question in the headline is boycotting Israel hate? And he goes into a lengthy analysis. I encourage you to read that. But at the center of it is he notes how the advocates for boycotting Israel have been turned into haters and linked to the alt-right by the Israeli lobby, its elected supporters of both parties, and the American media. And he notes that a reasonable argument would allow discussion of BDS. But that is shut down because the people who support the Zionist government in Israel do not recognize this. And he quotes Chuck Schumer, Senate leader, Democrat, at AIPAC last March. He said, "Let us call out the BDS movement for what it is. Let us delegitimize the delegitimizers by letting the world know when there is a double standard, whether they know it or not, they are actively participating in an anti-Semitic movement." So this is what turns the argument on its ear and allows them to claim that by trying to delegitimize the government of the State of Israel through criticism and through economic boycotts, that this violates the constraints on public reason. And he concludes by saying, opponents of BDS are now turning to the heavy hand of the state to criminalize support for it. In a fair fight within the domain of public reason, they would indeed find themselves delegitimized. There's a great deal more to it, but I'm running short of time here in the podcast today and had to compress that a little bit. Please do follow the link and read Levine's commentary, because I think that it's extremely powerful and well argued. Thanks for listening to this daily news and comment podcast. You'll find it on YouTube, and I authorize you to share it with absolutely everyone. I'm Peter B.
Happy trails to you until we meet again. Happy trails to you. Keep smiling